The Life and Estates of C.Z. Guest. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and like this video. C.Z. Guest was the ultimate icon of simplistic American elegance, a muse to photographers, artists, and designers. It was Truman Capote who famously dubbed her as the cool vanilla lady, and was among the few select swans who stood steadfastly by him after the fallout with La Côte Basque. Born into the upper echelons of Boston society on February 19, 1920, she was one of 4 children, and originally was called Lucy Douglas Cochran. However, she adopted the initials CZ after her brother playfully coined the nickname, unable to pronounce sister. Her father, Alexander, served as an investment banker, but tragically passed away when she was just 6 years old. Despite this, she was raised in a sprawling mansion boasting 40 rooms, and she made a memorable and successful debut into society at the age of 17 in 1937. The ballroom for her coming-out party was exquisitely adorned to mirror the romantic allure of Paris. During this period, her burgeoning interest in charity work began, marking the onset of one of her lifelong passions. Simultaneously, another passion took root in her young heart: gardening. As a child, she would follow the family's estate's gardener, observing his meticulous work. This early fascination blossomed into a profound love for it, leading her to pen several books on the subject, and even develop an insect repellent later in life. Reflecting on her love for gardening, CZ once remarked, "I've always felt like having a garden is like having a good and loyal friend." Despite her poised and refined demeanor, CZ also harbored a daring and adventurous side. In 1937, she claimed the title of the glamour girl of Massachusetts' North Shore, embracing a moment of flamboyance. Following in her mother's footsteps, she briefly ventured into the world of show business, and even studied acting at the 20th Century Fox Studio School in Hollywood. Although she never appeared in a film, rumors swirled about a possible romance with the dashing Errol Flynn. Her foray into entertainment continued as she briefly performed as a Ziegfeld Follies girl in a Broadway revival, adding a touch of vivacity to her already fascinating life story. "I never made any films," the one-time aspiring actor once said of her never hitting the big time. "I went out to parties with Victor Mature, Bruce Cabot, and Errol Flynn. I played tennis every day, and I loved every minute of it." She captivated allure and distinctive elegance inspired by a myriad of artists, beginning with the Mexican artist Diego Rivera, for whom she posed after traveling to Mexico. Notably, her husband later acquired the portrait, initially displayed in a bar in Mexico City. Her magnetic presence also captivated the likes of Andy Warhol and Salvador Dali, both of whom found her the ideal muse for their artistic endeavors. Additionally, she became the subject for photographer Slim Arrons, whose iconic color photographs of her at her mother-in-law's Palm Beach villa remain among his most celebrated works. Through Arrons' lens, CZ encapsulated a specific essence of Americana, the glamorous, affluent, and stylish individuals who achieved celebrity status in mid-century America simply by being themselves. CZ in many ways personifies this era, embodying its charm and allure. With her chic, simplistic aesthetic and allure of a serene self-assurance, CZ's taste was distinctly her own. Unbound by passing trends, she favored designers such as Maine Boucher, Adolfo, Givenchy, and Balenciaga, whose timeless and refined designs resonated with her. She embraced a classic, pared-down elegance that spoke volumes about her discerning style. Her fashion sensibilities earned her a perennial place on the best-dressed list from the 1950s onward, eventually solidifying her status in its Hall of Fame. She graced the cover of Time magazine in 1962, bearing the headline, "A Legend in Her Own Time." In 1947, C.Z. Guest married Winston Fredrick Churchill Guest, whose lineage traced back to a familial connection with the iconic statesman Winston Churchill, as a first cousin once removed. Their wedding unfolded at Ernest Hemingway's residence in Cuba, where the legendary author stood as the best man, adding a literary and historical weight to the ceremony. The Guest family, esteemed in both British politics and business since the 18th century, boasted a rich legacy, while Winston Guest himself achieved acclaim as an indoor polo champion, further enriching the couple's storied background and legacy. Cece and Winston's union brought forth 2 children, Alexander and Cornelia. Their daughter, Cornelia, garnered significant attention as a popular debutante, drawing media interest, much to the amusement of her mother. Cece and Winston chose their close friends, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, to be the godparents of their children. Embracing a life with the international jet set, Cece and Winston enjoyed a vibrant social circle, engaging in hunts alongside illustrious figures such as the Maharaja of Jaipur in India and General Franco in Spain. These experiences further enriched their already fascinating lives, contributing to their legacy as prominent personalities within high society and global social spheres. Cece's passion for horses kindled during her childhood, when she received riding lessons from champion riders, flourished into a lifelong hobby. Becoming a formidable equestrian competitor, she commanded respect and admiration within those circles. She attributed the athletic discipline from a young age to keep her grounded amidst the lavish world she inhabited. She took an active role in managing her husband's stables in Virginia, overseeing their operations and personally exercising the horses whenever possible. Despite the social norms of her time, which emphasized discretion, her dedication to equestrian pursuits remained unwavering, reflecting her independent spirit and commitment to her passions. When Cece married Winston, they had many properties. She stated in a 1977 interview, "I love beauty and style. My goodness. I want my houses to always be beautifully turned out and in style. I'm very meticulous about my houses. I want to have the best wine, the best food, and the best thoroughbred horses." In 1958, a profile proclaimed her as one of the too small a number of young matrons who actually give thought to the details of correct entertaining. When it came to decoration, Cece followed in the footsteps of many of her social set by the ultra-fashionable Stephen Boudin, the dapper Frenchman who had retired as the president of Maison Jensen. He was arguably the greatest decorator of the 20th century, putting his stamp on the Kennedy White House, the Palm Beach residence and Manhattan apartment of collectors Jane and Charles Wrightsman, and multiple houses for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. For the Guests, Boudin primarily reworked a huge Sutton Place South penthouse in New York City, working on a salmon dining room and yellow and green library. It was not an apartment for a normal family, Cece once observed of the palatial duplex built for her mother-in-law in 1927, later subdivided, then sold in the early 1960s. She stated, "We lived on one side, and my son Alexander lived with Nanny on the other side. Later, it was gutted and made significantly mod. The upper floor now belongs to Lisa Perry. The fashion designer and art collector Bill Blass also lived in one of the downstairs sections." Boudin's creative touch was also evident at the Guests' estate Templeton, a grand 55-room property set on over 100 acres in the old Westbury area of Roslyn, Long Island. Originally, architect Thomas Hastings of Carrere and Hastings, the firm behind the New York Public Library, as well as what is now known as the Frick Collection, and the deluxe decorating establishment, Charles of London, completed the home for Alicia and Alfred DuPont in 1917. The clients christened it White Eagle. In 1921, a lawyer acting for the Phillips Steele family purchased White Eagle at a private auction, and soon it became the country house of Winston Guest's parents, the former Amy Phipps and her husband, Fredrick Guest, a British politician who was the grandson of the 7th Duke of Marlborough. they renamed it Rosslyn Manor. Upon Amy's death in 1959, Cece and Winston changed the property's name yet again, this time to Templeton, which carried sentimental as well as prideful associations. Templeton House had been the suburban London home of Winston's grandfather, and Templeton had once been the name of Winston and his brother's champion polo team. At Templeton, Boudin blended together heirloom English furniture and antique French furnishings among Anglophile architecture to create what had been described as the most charming home on Long Island. It was then that Boudin was also working on the White House, to which, in 1961, Cece donated the Empire banquettes that stand in the entrance hall. Villa Artemis was designed in 1916 for Fredrick and Amy Phipps Guest by architect F. Burrell Hoffman, who also designed Villa Vizcaya, the grand estate in Miami. It was never Cece's house, although the Slim Arrons photographs certainly gave it that impression. So much so that when the iconic poolside picture accompanied her New York Times obituary, the caption read, "In a famous Slim Arrons picture at her Palm Beach, Florida estate in 1955. The estate ended up being purchased out of the family's hands in 1959. It so happened that in the late 1960s, the Guests fell into financial difficulties and ended up having to sell Templeton. By 1969, they transitioned into a new home, a charming English country-style house that served as their primary residence thereafter. This property was modest in appearance compared to its opulent predecessor, lacking the strapwork ceiling, marble staircase, and majestic curved peristyle of their previous home. Although ditto to Templeton's expansive acreage, this home was 15 rather than 100 plus, and featured sprawling square footage of 11,000 versus 48,000. Truman Capote, a close friend of the family, described it as small and delightful. Despite the downsizing, Cece and Winston approached this new chapter with characteristic panache, embodying Cece's belief that style is about surviving and making the challenging look effortless. The transition to this residence presented Cece with the opportunity to create vibrant and eclectic decor, characterized by chromatic boldness and artful design, rather than relying on architectural grandeur. This shift was necessitated by the sale of numerous antique European and French porcelain pieces, as well as choice French furnishings that had been sold at Christie's in 1967. Their new home mirrored her natural inclination for striking aesthetics. The house, adorned with towering orchids and variegated ivy topiaries displayed in green plastic pots, exuded a sense of whimsy. This departure from traditional opulence was reminiscent of Cece's audacious spirit and flair for the unconventional. This new estate was far cozier than Templeton, despite the many heirlooms on parade. Andy Warhol, after a Christmas Day visit in 1976, admirably wrote in his diaries that the decorations and the food of the house were just like a spread in McCall's or House and Garden. As in the Windsor's vast Bois de Boulogne entry hall, the woodwork of the guests' corridor, dining room, and library, where the cornice, door, and window frames, window reveals, radiator covers, skirting boards, even the mantel, were vividly marbleized. In fact, there was plenty of faux marble throughout the home, from apricot, being in the living room and Cece's bedroom, to black in the entrance hall, to spinach green again in Cece's study, dressing up the pedestrian moldings and giving them a kind of Venetian-style stage-set nobility. The walls of the dining room and hall were tinted to complement the almond green paint that had been dragged, a technique hardly seen anymore, perhaps because of the overuse of it in the 1980s. The vertical special effect breaks up the colors and adds more subtle rhythm and variation. The adjacent library was wrapped in a printed cotton, that must have been particularly favored because it lined Zizi's bedroom too, though in a honey-tone colorway. The unique and eclectic decor was a reflection of Zizi's personal style and interest, and created vibrant spaces that exuded an unapologetic bravado and individuality. It was in 1976, following a writing incident, that she found herself seeking alternative pursuits. She ventured into publishing, releasing a gardening book illustrated by her friend Cecil Beaton, followed by another title, Tiny Green Thumbs, aimed at nurturing children's interest in gardening. She even had a gardening column in the New York Post, which achieved widespread syndication, reaching 350 national newspapers. In 1981, her husband passed away, and she delved into the realms of design, creating a line of cashmere sweaters and later expanding into sportswear. Notably, she also developed a fragrant insect repellent, Zizi's Reserve, a creation that spared her from potential embarrassment. Through these diverse endeavors, Zizi reinvented herself, carving out new paths while preserving her distinct sense of grace and determination. Zizi's allure even extended to her interactions with Truman Capote. She, like Slim Keith, maintained a certain level of reserve, never fully unveiling her private life to the famed author. Despite Capote's admiration for her elegance and style, the relationship remained distant compared to his connections with other swans, like Babe Paley. Remarkably, she stood among the rare leading figures in society who did not distance themselves from Capote after the scandal of La Côte Basque. Reflecting on Zizi's life, a New York Times article encapsulated it as an enchanting life, emphasizing her ability to uphold an air of discretion. When she passed away in 2003 at her home in Old Westbury at the age of 83, Zizi Guest left behind a lasting influence on American style, shaping the iconic look of designers such as Ralph Lauren, Michael Kors, and Oscar de la Renta. In 1976, she stated, "What's wrong with women inspiring others to higher standards?" Thank you so much for watching this video on the life and estates of Zizi Guest. Please let me know which estate was your favorite in the comments down below, and which videos you'd like to see next. And also consider subscribing to our newsletter to find out more about Zizi Guest, which you can find in the description of this video and in the pinned comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.